hello. Good evening. Welcome to South TV. My name is Monica Pinsako Guta. Today we have a discussion that I know a lot of people have been waiting for. We are unpacking white privilege. I'm going to allow each guest to introduce themselves so that we can start our discussion. Starting with you, Spiwe.
Hi, everybody. Wonderful again to be here on this platform. My name is Pireka Chizama. I've, I've been on this platform a couple of times, and I don't know how to say myself or present myself, but I'm an advocacy. I do a lot of advocacy on a whole lot of things, and I'm very much interested in issues that affect Black people and
Okay, Lee, can you introduce
Hello, my
yourself?
oh yeah, sorry. Yes, hello. My name is Lee Madzinga. I've been on Salve TV one other time. I'm a podcaster, and our podcast specifically the Undeniable Future podcast. You can catch us at theundeniablefuture.com. We specifically like to talk about world events and what's going on today. I am a person who's very worried about the situation materially that Black people find themselves in all over the world, and it's something that I find really important. So I'm really thankful to be a part of this conversation today, and to be a part of something like this, where hopefully we can come to some answers, or at least come to some understandings on some things. It's important to have these kind of conversations.
Fantastic, Chris.
Yeah, hi. This is my first time on the platform, and I'm Chris. I'm currently we live half the year in Jamaica and then half the year in Canada. This is the Jamaica half, and we just beat the Canadian government by 2 weeks now. So flights are as of tomorrow and Sunday are canceled from the Caribbean. So I guess just in general, I guess there's an interest in this whole topic. My wife is a Black Jamaican. My children are mixed, and my grandchildren are multiracial. And so I'm really I really have things to do and work to do, and certainly inspired by their lives and what they're dealing with and not dealing with. So I'm glad to see you all. From your names, I'm thinking that many of you are from West Africa, and I spent a couple of years in Gambia, and so I enjoyed my time there too. So that's my African connection to this conversation.
Fantastic. Pastor Pezi.
Yeah, my name is Pezi Kudakwashe. I am a journalist by profession, and I'm also a minister. So it's always good to see, even in the Bible, that there were shepherds and there were scribes. So, because we have to, there are things that we can say as ministers, there are things that we can write also as scribes, So I think I enjoy being on this program, and I think this is my third time to be on this program. I would say I'm a child of Zimbabwean parents, but I was born in Zambia. So I know what it is to live in a foreign country, or to be born in a foreign country, and there are certain things that you are not entitled to, that I think will also maybe be able to allow me to contribute in this program today.
Thank you so much. We have Annette in the house. Good to see you here. Annette, can you introduce yourself and just probably give a brief, your brief explanation of why this topic is of interest to you?
Well, I come from a farm and ranch background in Idaho, so I was very much protected from white privilege. there was no bigotry or bias or racial discrimination in my home. Lived in a community where we had a lot of Mexicans. I went to school with them, had them as best friends. But also, I went to church, and we traveled 50 miles to go to the church that we were attending. And it was an African American family that invited me and my family home to their home for dinner after church. And that was just the beginning of, they were in my classes together, and but it was an unforgettable experience. And as I was thinking about that this morning, would you believe that my brother and I had not talked, but um, he sent me the obituary of the woman who invited us to their home. She just died this last week.
Oh, sorry to
And
hear.
he and I had not talked. I actually wept because the timing was so perfect. My husband and I have spent 3 years in Ethiopia. We've had a very multicultural experience in school, in the churches that my husband pastored. I spoke in Uganda at a global women's summit, and my husband and I spoke to thousands of Ugandan students. Have done a lot of work with indigenous people. So my experience and exposure um, to people of other colors has been phenomenal. But I've never ever um, felt a bias or negativity toward them. But it
Okay,
began with my early experience as a child.
right. Thank you. Um, there are some people who do not know what white privilege is. And I think we would like to start by just having an understanding from probably 1 minute each and every one of you to say what white privilege represent to you, how you understand it. Starting with Pastor Pezzi. Oh, sorry.
Well, I can start. When I was
It's okay.
taking nursing, when
It's
I
okay.
was taking nursing, sorry, go ahead, Monica.
Go ahead, Annette. Pastor Pezzi will come after you.
When I was taking nursing, uh, there was an African American student that was the year ahead of me. She's a beautiful gal, and I loved her so much. And at Christmas time, I was from Idaho, and we were in Portland, Oregon, doing our clinical experience. And because she was from, I can't remember if it was North Carolina or South Carolina, I invited her to come home with me for Christmas. Now, she already had another invitation, but she said, Annette, in my state, I would not even be able to go to your back door, to say nothing about spending the night in your home or spending Christmas Day with you. That was my first experience with white privilege. I was stunned because I'd never heard of such a thing before.
Thank you. Pastor Pezzi.
Yeah, I think the way I understand white privilege, it's inherent privilege, something that someone behind there worked their way and made sure that the law, the business, the community, everything was designed in such a way that it will support this group of people. No matter who comes, that thing will support those people. And so they're born and it's there. And they're entitled to this thing. They don't have to start from scratch. They don't have to start from zero. It's already there. It's like being born in a royal family. It's already there. So it's already yours. And that's what I understand about. But this happens to uh, people with lighter skin, like white people.
Okay.
That's white privilege. Yeah.
Okay. Spiwe?
Well, to me, white privilege is just um, that which gives access to power and resources to a certain group of people than the other. And in this case, is just, as Percy said, it's almost like intrinsic. It's something that is just there by virtue of being white. You can access anything you want, and people perceive you more positively than they would with of anybody, a person of color, by virtue of being white.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I think the description kind of has been said for that I can understand. But I'd like to just sort of open with a quotation, and I think it really gets to the root cause, right? From my view, right? So this is from and it says, history is always written by the winners. When two cultures clash, the loser is obliterated, and the winner writes the history. Books which glorify their own cause and then disparage the conquered foe. As Napoleon once said, what is history but a fable agreed upon? And I see now when they speak about systematic racism, right, and how that's created, and I've come to understand all of this. What I've come to say is a systematic dehumanization. And so the conqueror or the winner, as a way to justify their advantage, needs to leave the other culture down and keep them down. So in the case of North America, my ancestors came to actually America in 1630. And so they in turn, obliterated in a number of ways and stole the land of indigenous people in the U.S. And then eventually they even migrated north and did it a second time in the Ottawa area, where my ancestors came and did it a second time for two countries. But that's when the history, at least my family's history, of white privilege started. And so with all of that, I guess I'm in kind of a phase of what I call truth and reconciliation from my white privilege. Like, when did it start? How did it give me the advantage? And when did I realize it? And now what am I doing about it?
Yes, I think that was the question I was coming to. But before I get there, I want to hear from Lee what his definition of white privilege is.
So, for me, my definition of white privilege would go along with what everybody has said here pretty closely. But I think where I might be kind of different is when I see white privilege, I think of it in a materialistic way. So because of history and the way history has worked, whether that be for us, there's a lot of Black people on here, whether that be in Africa or in North America, that history has worked in a way that has disadvantaged Black people and minorities for a very long time. Those privileges that come with that, when you talk about resources, I think Pastor Spiwe, she said in a very amazing way that resources have been passed down in a way where Black people have been disadvantaged because they haven't had the opportunity to pass down wealth that has been inherited. So a lot of the privileges we see are because of people who have inherited that wealth over time. What I would say is I think that privilege is minimized as we work every single day and put people who are minorities in positions of power. We put those people in positions where they can make change, where they have a voice. And I think our society is moving towards that, whether it be slowly, maybe it's not very fast. I think we are moving towards a society where things are more even. And I think that the white privilege we've seen today is mostly about inherited wealth, and it's about how do we take that message as minorities and turn it into something positive in the future? How do we learn to accumulate that wealth and pass it down to generations past as well?
Okay. Um, Chris, you mentioned that we want to know at what age did you realize that you know this that is happening here, even though it's benefiting me, it is just not right.
Um, it was in the Caribbean it was in Jamaica again in 1977. And I'm sitting talking to what would be my soon to be wife's grandmother. And she was very pleased at the color of my skin. For her, it meant something, right? Where my father-in-law was a dark-skinned black man, and so she started to tell me how the whole race thing figured out for her. She told me that when a black marries a white, you have a mulatto. I knew that. I knew as much as that. But I didn't realize there were 3 or 4 other classifications that the British colonials had given to people of color. And so she told me that, well, if a black marries a white, you're a mulatto. And if a mulatto marries a white, you're a Costi. And if a Costi marries a white, you're a Musty. And I think there was one more, but I can't recall. And then I asked her when she ran out of classifications. Then she said, "Well, what if that married that? The final one." She paused. She was about 80 some years old. She paused and said, "Well, they're white again." And that's the time of I deeply realized just how systematic, how entrenched color and yet if you go back to just a little thing, if you go back to the American, there was an American law that said any one drop meant you were not white. So you could be 164th, 128th, or whatever. And so that's the moment of where I understood it in a deeper way. But I never, and that just carried on. And then I started, as I lived in West Africa, as I lived in the Caribbean, and over time, then it became more impactful. And only now is it really becoming, really have to change deep down and look inside me. But that's when I first recognized white privilege.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting, because the word Molako, I only heard it maybe about 4 months ago. I never heard of it. And I was like, what is Molako? And it was explained that it is when a child is from a white parent and a black parent. But the in-betweens, the other ones that you explained, I've never heard of them. And so I certainly was thinking there is just white and black, and then maybe in Zimbabwe we used to call them colored, but then here in North America, coloreds is a different. It has got a different meaning, but also in some areas people find it offensive. So there's just so much that goes on with all these words. Spiwe, would you like to chime in and say your thoughts?
Yeah, yes, we're talking about unpacking white privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I think white privilege has changed meaning over the years. Because before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, this was not even an issue that was discussed, because it was just there, and they didn't look at it as any privilege in any way or any form. It was just the way things were. But because of the Civil Rights Act, and more so now, as we discuss this issue, the events of last spring, the killing of George Floyd, it has heightened people's consciousness when it comes to why is it that a black person could be killed right there in front of our eyes, and people, certain people who are non-melanated people, or white people, or people who are not of color, they still stand out there and try to justify it, or try to not see the problem in it. If that happened to a white child, it would not be perceived the same way. So really, white privilege has taken center stage right now because people are more aware of, or maybe more a heightened, um, how can I put it, awareness of what's going on and the disparities that are there. When something happens and it's a person who is not a person of color, it's perceived differently, it's handled differently. And when it comes to a black person or people of color, it's treated differently. Therefore, that's when people then look at it and say, it is because of that privilege which exists that it's okay. It's not looked at in any other way. Like, what's the big deal? Before the civil rights act way back then, it was not a question. A black person, you see someone you're walking in the street, you move away, you go there, you don't question it, because that's how it was then. But now
Mm.
things are different, and as we are talking, we are trying to unpack this whole thing, what it looks like, what it looked like, and specifically, what does it mean?
Right.
Again, it boils down to the privilege that other people do, um, either economically or the resources available that are availed to you and not to another group.
Mm. Thank you. Pastor
Spiwe,
Pezi. Okay, go ahead.
Spiwe, uh, Spiwe, after the Black Lives Matter opened up, and I was determined that I wanted to know from my African.
Oh,
I think her network seems to keep dropping,
mhm.
but I think I,
Mm.
I kind of have an idea what she wants um, to talk about. But I remember I had a friend. We had this friend from Women Talk. I went to meet with her, I think in either September or August, but that was like a week or so before she passed. So she had witnessed everything that was going on. And when I went to visit, she said to me, I see everyone, people as all humans. I don't understand what is going on. And I could see that from the way she treated me, she was genuine in every way, but she could not comprehend what was happening. And it was the way she asked me what was, if I had experienced any of that, and if I
Mm.
did, what was it? Because she genuinely wanted to understand. Um, Pastor Pezi, what are your experiences?
Never, okay, yeah. Fortunately, I've never like really experienced something so drastic that I can point and say this was racism. But I have seen uh, that the system, because I think it's Sister Spio, you said because the system now is being exposed, right? But there's also a way of hiding it. And the best way you can see this is look at the churches. It was the missionaries, the white missionaries, who came to preach to us in Africa. And today you come to America. I was credentialed by a church that came from America, came to Zambia. I'm credentialed with that church, but under the African tag. But when you come here, for you to be credentialed by that church, it's not easy, especially here in the USA. So now there's a branch of that same church that is German. So the German branch has an office here. It's easy for you to be ordained under the German, tag, you know. But when these missionaries come to Africa, they want credentials as soon as they come in, and you don't have to ask questions. Now, I'm just trying to say that just to highlight a different picture, and I'm saying that because that is the church side, where we expect things to be fair and balanced, where we expect that you do things based on how your heart is. You know, when you see churches here, you find churches are black churches, white churches. It doesn't matter what you say. It's clear that there's a difference between there's a white church and a black church. If you see a church that has got
Okay,
a few white people,
okay, go
that's
back.
okay. If you see a church that has got a few black people and the pastor is white, they're there, but it doesn't really happen that way. Now, to disguise this, the people will open up, will say good things, but the systems like the economy, you know, it's still run by white people. Education, hospitals, people can run away from being vaccinated. But remember that if you're running away from someone that you like, the Africans are running away from white people saying, "Oh, if they vaccinate me, maybe they'll do something to." But when you get sick, you're going to see that white doctor. I'm just giving that as an example.
Hmm.
Education, when there was busing, when there was segregation, zoning, the white people were given better schools,
Mhm.
better teachers, and the black people were given less privileges. In 1971, when Richard Nixon introduced the war on drugs, for sure there was an issue on drugs. People were overdosing and everything. But when he did the war on drugs, the law was the one that separated, because crack was for black people because it was cheaper, and cocaine was for white people.
Hmm.
But if you were found with 5 grams of crack, you were given 5 years. And if you were found with 500 grams of cocaine, you were given 5 years. No one talked about color, but the one who made that law was very clever, because they knew that, but the poor people were going for crack,
Hmm.
and they were not going to be found with 500 grams of of crack or cocaine. They would be found with those that cheap and in small amounts. So they gave them the same, sentence, because the white people who had more money, they were going to buy more. But once they are found 500, it was up to the maximum of 500. You still get 5 years. So you find that even the idea of of creating projects for the black people, in the sense that they are helping the black people, but it takes away privileges. You give them a 5 bedroom house for them to pay $200. That's a scheme. That's a plan. You know that if this person stays, anyone, if you give them a 5 room house, that is not theirs, and you tell them just pay us 200, they're not going to think about finding a job, saving money, because they know as long as grandma stays in this house for the next 50 years, I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm saying that because of the system, the people who were planning these things, they made sure that they understood what they were doing. And at the end of the day, you find that because of the way it was designed, you know it was meant to suck from the poor people, and made sure that it gave the white people.
Mhm. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
I think you're muted, Monica.
It's for Lee. It's,
Oh, for
can
me,
you?
okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think so. I may have this beard, but I'm only 25 years old. Um, and as somebody who grew up kind of during this current generation, what I find, what I find interesting is when I went to school, when I went to go hang out on basketball courts, whether it be in Canada or the United States, when I was when I did anything I wanted to do as a kid. I did a lot of sports. So anything I did, it never dawned on me that the white people in my who I grew up with were in any way more privileged than I. Most of the smartest people in school or when I was growing up were girls, and they were usually girls of color, right? Those were the most intelligent. And when I grew up in this system, I didn't really see white privilege. I would say when I finally saw white privilege was when I began my university studies, and then I could see that the white children that I was going to school with, they were my age, they also their parents had prepared them in a way that I realized not many black people would have that opportunity. So I'm talking about things like I had a lot of friends had who had stock portfolios when they were 17 years old. You know what I mean? Like these are things that as black people we don't really pass on that type of knowledge to generations past. I realized that they had homes, but their parents also had homes who had homes who had homes. So they could afford to live in these really nice homes. And they had amazing homes that Chris Rock makes a joke where he says, me, I'm one of the most famous people in the world, but the person who lives next to me is a doctor, is a white doctor, and it showed me this. As I realized these things, I realized the issue is we don't have the same material wealth that white people have, and disparity will always exist. So we're in a really tough spot where whether you are in Africa and you've been colonized, or you are in North America and you are a descendant of slavery, you are in a situation where you just happen to be born black. And because you were born black, there are certain disadvantages that you have in your life. But what I've but during the generation I grew up in, I saw a black president, you know? And I see people like Jagmeet Singh who have very important government positions. I see black people doing really well who are CEOs of big companies. These are things that I grew up with that already exist. And um, Pastor Spewer, you brought up the 1964. Sorry, you brought up the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and the 1964 Civil Rights Act is one of the most important pieces of legislation ever written. And what it did was it brought equality to all the people who live within the United States by race. It says that the government can no longer distinguish through race. Over time, black people have had to deal with the fact that socially and monetarily they are oppressed, but over time you see the progress that is happening, and it's important for us to also realize that progress. So when we speak about things like white privilege, we also need to realize just how far we've came, just how bad it was for those who had to fight for us to get here. And and we also need to ask ourselves, at what point does that white privilege become something where it has no serious effect on people? So somebody who's a middle class black person, I don't think feels white privilege the same way somebody who is who is a poor black person. I don't think they feel it in the same way.
Years ago, I was coaching a group of emerging speakers, and they were divided into groups of about 6 or 8 students. And at this one table, they're beautiful, beautiful African American, African Canadian woman, and the rest were Caucasian. And I was watching what was happening, and she seemed silent. I didn't see her contributing to the group. And so I at the break time, I pulled her aside and I said, Albina, you are a brilliant woman. You have a right to speak, and you need to voice your opinions. She went back to the group, and it was like she came alive, and she started speaking and sharing and commenting. But I was smitten with the fact that she needed permission to do that. And I was watching. I didn't feel that people were ignoring her or putting her down in any way, but she needed permission, and that spoke very loud to me. It made me feel sad that she felt that she was perhaps less important or that she didn't have the right to speak. Yet she was a well educated, well spoken woman.
If people have experienced oppression, some which might be visible or invisible, that kind of oppression will have a lot of influence on how they behave. Before I
Yes.
come to you, Spiwe, I let me go to Chris.
Would you something to ask or to keep commenting? What would you like?
We you just carry on with what
Okay.
you.
All right.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. The question. A friend of mine, long-term friend of mine, is an Indigenous woman in Canada. And when the whole issue of white privilege and all this issues were coming to rise after George Floyd, I had sort of the white guilt. Oh my God, I have a history of family. How am I been? And I think about my racist upbringing as a child, the little rhymes we used to do and play games, and how they were. Oh my God, I wouldn't even repeat them now. So she said to me, maybe you should stop apologizing for something that you'll never do again. And this is not something to apologize for. And then she said to me that she said, here's a series of questions. She said, how do you feel about the advantages that you had of being a white person? How do you feel about that? And then she says, and now that you know, what has changed about you? Now that you know you had these privileges and you benefited from them, right? What has changed? And then she said, well, how do you challenge yourself now? Now, because really it's all about the action you take now. Yeah, you can apologize if you feel it's necessary, but she started getting me away from the guilt and the apology on what am I going to do about it now? Now that I know, now that I see, and then she went on to say, who are your allies and support you, and what are you going to do about it on a daily basis? So she challenged me to action. So all of us in the white world of the white people we will have to go through some of this reconciliation, some of these things. And then one thing that I also wanted to add is some of the struggles that my own children have. My son can trace his heritage back to a black slave owner and a black slave as his ancestors. So how does he reconcile himself? So there's a whole right now, I think for many, there's a reconciliation. For some, I'm not a racist should be enough. For others, well, I'm not as racist as you are, or as them, that should be enough. But it really is about taking that stock, taking that inventory, seeing how it advantages, and now what are you going to do about it? Now that you know, what are you doing about it? Full stop. You're on mute, Ned.
Okay, Spiwe.
Okay. It's a good
Okay,
thing because we are here and talking about this topic, which is very, very important on white privilege, what it looks like and our experiences with it. But to me, I think the most important thing is acknowledging that there is white privilege. and it's a good thing because we've got Annette and Chris who are not non-melanated people, they are white people. Okay, ability to look at it and acknowledge that it exists, that is the primary thing. Because for me, I can be quite, you know, about issues. And what really upsets me when I'm in the midst of people who are not me, who are not African, because I mean, for me, it's really a multi-layered. I'm a woman, I'm a black woman, and I'm an African woman, and all those intersectionalities, they play a big role in defining this white privilege anyway. But if people cannot acknowledge what I am going through, that I know you're black, you're African, you're a woman. I know what you're talking about because I see it. Me being a white person, I don't go through that. That is the beginning of it. But when people refuse or deny that there is a problem, that is a typical example of white privilege, because you cannot dismantle, the, the master's house with these weapons. You have to really use some other weapons and really advocate for yourself and talk about it and explain it so that they understand that they have the privilege, so they don't feel the disadvantage that one does not have. It's very, very important. And also, it comes in different ways. We talk of systemic racism, we talk of systemic privilege that people have. If I apply for a job with a name like mine, and Lee, the pastor is Pezi. I mean, I'm not a pastor.
I apologize so much.
That's
Somebody
okay.
sent me a message, in
You bring
fact,
me
so
closer
I
to
know
the
now.
Lord,
I
right?
apologize.
No
Yes.
problem. But what I was trying to say is, these kind of things. Uh, we talk of microaggression. We experience it every single day, and it's part of white privilege. You go into a shop. Hey, I'm quite an educated woman. I can articulate myself. I carry myself with dignity. I was raised properly. You go into a shop. I'm just looking around. You find somebody following you around. You've heard so many stories of this kind of thing. By virtue of me being black, and by virtue of my name, if they ask me my name, Spiwe, it sounds weird, so to speak, to them. You know, those are the kind of things, the layers that one goes through. It's systemic, the systemic racism, which we experience every day. You apply for a job, you got a name which looks different. You go for an interview, you speak with an accent. It doesn't matter whether you're brilliant or not. All those things, they look at you differently. They look at you, they're like, no, if Mary comes in or Joanne comes in for the interview, it doesn't matter whether she's less education than this person, but she's got a name that we can deal with. Those kind of things, they add up to the privilege that certain people have, and I don't have. I don't have a name like that. I don't have an accent like that. I might have a brain bigger than that, but that doesn't matter.
Speedway, I am so, you and I had a big discussion a few months ago, and Monica as well. And I intentionally called 5 people of African or Caribbean, Canadian heritage. And this was during the hashtag Black Lives Matter, because I wanted to know, what is your experience? And my mind was just opened and expanded to the pain that you experience and how you are treated. That just is so wrong. And at one point, I know, Speedway, you said to me you were in a store and somebody did something and said something to you, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And you said, "That's okay." I said, "It's not okay. It is not okay." And I think what I've learned as I've listened to here today, and I apologize for my stuff not working, but I believe that once we as non African American, that we need to have our eyes open, we need to listen, we need to acknowledge, and we need to not be bystanders. Standers. If we see something or hear something that is wrong, we need to speak up. Now, we don't need to be aggressive and hateful about it, but we need to speak up. because it's only those of us that see things and recognize them can help to make changes. We can't expect you to make the changes. It has to come from those of us that are not in your group. I'm not even sure what to call your group. BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. We it's a we need to stand up and speak. Even in my husband's extended family, he was on the phone one day, and one of the extended family members made a terrible comment, a very racist comment, and my husband was stunned. He was shocked, but he didn't do anything. And I'm very compassionate with him, because it takes courage. We have to muster the courage to speak out and maybe go back to that person and say, when we were talking about such and such, and you said this, I just want you to know that I was offended by it. And I know that my friends that are multicultural would be hurt and offended. So there are ways that we can deal with it.
Absolutely. I think basically really talking about it, challenging it. But
Yes.
when someone is discriminated against because of some disadvantages that are associated with them, the tendency is for those who are in a more advantageous position do not want also to be segregated. They do not want to be alienated. So they would decide to keep quiet because they do not want to find themselves now being associated with Blackness or being seen as people supporting Black people. But it does take courage. And really, I like the picture we saw of women who stood holding hands, white women who stood holding hands, and they were saying, these people are our family, these people are our neighbors, these people are some of us. And so we cannot keep quiet anymore. That should really continue. It shouldn't have been a one-off because of the George Floyd issue.
That's right. Yeah.
It should continue as we go along. More and more people should speak up. More and more people should really say this is wrong, but not only speak, but also show it in their actions. Pastor Pezzi, would you like to chime in? And then after we go to Chris.
Okay, thank you. I'm really happy with Chris and Annette that like you said, it's not easy, especially if you're swimming against the current. If you're saying things that everybody knows and everybody's comfortable, but to be able to start maybe just from the two of you, and we begin to spread this news. I remember a few years ago, I was in Maine, in the state of Maine, and my senior pastor was a white person who had lived in the Middle East for 18 years. And one day he stood up in church and he said, white people, we are responsible for the genocide of the Indian people, the native people. And every white person looked at him like he was crazy. And he began to go through the history, how the white people came and they started giving out clothes and blankets, knowing very well that that was their strategy to kill the Indians, because the Indians had no immunity, with the diseases that the white people had, the ones that came from Europe. And millions of Indians died. But he was one of the few people that stood up in that church and he wept in front of everybody. As a pastor, he confessed his sins. He said, because a curse based on the Bible, it passes from generation to the fourth generation. When God curses you, it goes to the third and fourth generation. So you may not say, oh, but I didn't commit it, but the curse is on you. Just like us, the black people, we know that the privilege that the white people have. I mentioned it in another program where I said the white people understand the three-tier blessing, where there is the grandfather, the father, and the son. You know, they keep that going so that it can be able to pass on the wealth within the family. But when you are in a place where you are fighting white privilege, you find that the main job for those, I mean, I'm not talking about all the white people are bad or evil, but there are people who are white who are strategic. They know that they want to topple off that structure. They know that if I take out the grandfather, there is information that's going to be missing. If I take out the son, the father in the middle, there's information. The son is going to grow with the grandfather. It's going to miss the father. That's why you find that if you go to a lot of black communities, there's a father missing, because somebody is strategizing to remove part of the puzzle that transfers wealth from the family to the generations that are coming. Now, it is our responsibility to begin to partner together, even if it means, Miss Monica, writing books, talking about this white privilege, and having all sides. Other sides saying, "Hey, we feel it." Other sides saying, "We've seen it." We belong to this group, because somebody has to speak up. Like if I was with a friend, we go into Walmart, and my friend was stealing. The law here is that when they arrest that guy, they're going to arrest me too, because we were together. It's the same as whatever crime is being committed by the black people that is bringing the benefits to the black people. We must stand up against those things and point them out. It's the same as the white people. If there are any things that are being done by people, and bringing the wealth to all the white people, or bringing benefits to white people, some of them must stand up and point them out and say, no, these are stolen. Look. They say if you go to Congo, there are mines that are as big as, if you know, the city of Dallas. They are like an entire village, but the people in Congo are suffering. Who is there? It is the people white people, Italians, Americans, Canadians. They are plundering that wealth and bringing it back to Canada, and everybody's benefiting from those people. But the people there are suffering. But there are many things that we're talking about. It's not just what we can see here in the neighborhoods. It is the things that also are happening outside the USA that are happening right now. People going to places where they are cutting down trees. Some of these trees are have been around for 100 years, and then they show up. They find this tree that is so precious in the USA, and it's just sitting. The guy doesn't even know what to do with it. They cut them, and they just give you a pair of shoes, and they get the tree. But people have to be told that some of these things you're doing is stealing. Some of these things you're doing is murder. Some of these things you're doing is evil. And then when we agree that as a team we can partner to be able to speak to both sides, then we'll be making headway.
I don't know if you're familiar with a book. It's called White Fragility, right? And white fragility, the subtitle of the book is "Why is it difficult for white people to talk about race?" Right? So white fragility is in itself is really what's blocking progress in many ways, right? And so what to do about it? And this is a quote that I want to show you from the book, and I just kind of, it says, "White folks, time to mature and face the world they created and create a new world for those who have neither the privilege or the protection." So y'all, most of you on this call have neither had the privilege or the protection that I have been afforded. right? And so I think that it's now the responsibility, and I think it is the responsibility, and it is the time. It's not for something for you, for you to. It really is our responsibility. This is a world that we created, and this is a world that we took advantage of, and now we got to create a new world where we do that. And so I think that's it. I'm always looking for a call to action. I'm very, I really have difficulty just with, well, what are you going to do about it now that you've had this conversation? So, but it really is about that. It's about what are you doing about it? What is your call to action? How do you face it? How do you confront it? And it really is up to us as the ones that have been the privilege to make the changes necessary. The rest, full stop.
Well,
Monica, we can't hear
I
you.
realize that I have a global view. Mine may be very limited in relation to those of you that have had such traumatic experiences. But nonetheless, I do have a global view because I see the fragmentation and the disconnection and the pain that I see around the world. And I see even just in the midst right here in this group and whoever the listeners and viewers are. But I also realize that I have a responsibility to communicate what I see and what I observe and what I have heard, and to help encourage people to open their eyes to listen to each other. And Monica, I really applaud you for opening up this space for this discussion. I mean, 1 hour is hardly enough time. We're just only barely beginning to scratch the surface. But I know that there is such deep pain and anger and fear and frustration out there because of what we're experiencing, and we're experiencing it all over the world. But we have to do something.
Yeah.
We have to do something. And in my work as a speaker and an author and a freedom facilitator and a coach, I need to do what I can. I realize that not everyone is capable, nor are they willing to do something, or maybe even to enter into the conversation. Some want to they want to hide their heads in the sand, or they want to sweep it under the rug, but we can't do that anymore. We don't have the luxury of sweeping it under the rug. We share a common humanity, and we must be willing to wrap our arms around each other, around each other's hearts, and to encourage and inspire and uplift each other, and to share what we can to help heal the wounds.
Thank you, Annette. And
Monica,
yeah,
I
I'm coming
was
to
just
you. Okay, go ahead. Then I'll go after.
No, I was just going to say, like we're saying, what are we going to do about it? Advocacy has never been an easy thing. And,
No.
for those people who are aware and are mindful of what's going on, we have to take it head on. And again, I see there's just been so much change globally. What happened last spring with the George Floyd, you could see how many white kids and white people who were in the streets, together with black people. People are tired of this. People are really tired. It's a span force and it's gone, and things have to happen. And believe it or not, it's gonna change. It's gonna take a long
Yeah.
time. And again, I like to use this statement that we can't use the usual tools that were used before to make a change. The whole world was ablaze. People were tired, sick and tired. It's
Mhm.
gonna change. It's going to change. People are tired of the privilege they have had. The white people who are joining in, they are really sick and tired because it's not working to their advantage.
Absolutely. It's not working anymore because uh, this is what I was saying around that time, that if you are a life coach, if you are a consultant, if you are in any business of any sort, it doesn't make sense that these things are happening and three-quarters of your clients are Black people and you are not saying anything. But what does it say about you? What does it say about the relationship that you have? Was it fake then? does it mean all you wanted from them was money and you don't care about them? So it is going to change because it is now challenging each and every person to their core. It's challenging their values, it's challenging what they stand for, it is challenging everything that they believe in. If it's a mother, it's challenging you that way. If you are a teacher, it's challenging you that way. And so I do believe you, Spiwe. Everybody is tired right now. People want this thing gone so that the people are more authentic and the relationships that we have is not um, kind of surrounded with tension all the time, because that is exhausting. In any case, everybody here has got a lifespan, and each person has got a lifespan, whether you are black, blue, green, or white. You're going to be here for a short while. After that, you will go. And no one is going to be buried somewhere floating in the air just because. All of us are going 6 feet under, and the way we decay is the same thing. And so it is time that we recognize that beneath the skin, everything is the same. So I'm going to give each and every one of you 2 minutes to conclude, and then you'll be telling us what you think should be done to move a step, just one or two steps forward, because this is definitely not a topic that we can cover in, it has variations as well. So maybe we can come back again looking at other angles of how we can deal with white privilege. I'm going to start with Lee.
I would say my the person I look up to the most is Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., because of his humanist stance when it came to things like this. He believed that we all had a common humanity, which is what made every person worth what their worth is. That we are all simply human, right? He could have told Americans that the reason you need to care about your other Americans that are minorities is because they are American. But he didn't do that because he understood that if we put ourselves in these holes, in these we go into our corners of people who are just like us, what we actually end up doing is not worrying about all the other human issues that go around in the world. And our common humanity is a very important point for me. So when we talk about fixing this issue, I think we need to get to a point where our language changes. The way we see people around us changes. So when you have black people, black people, I'll give an example of the word white privilege itself, right? We need to get to a point where words like white privilege have no power. They mean nothing.
Mhm.
We need to get to a point where somebody saying black power sounds just as crazy as the person saying white power, because our humanity matters, because you are a person and that is why you matter. And that for me is I think the next step we need to take is getting to a point where we all believe in our common humanity. And when you see a black person, it's just like seeing someone with blue eyes. You don't think that someone with blue eyes is smarter than you are. You don't think that they have, you don't think that there's something about them that's naturally better biologically. You don't believe that. If we can get to a point where we see everybody as a human being, and that alone gives them the intrinsic value to live and be just as worthy as every other person on this planet, I think we'll get to a point that is far better than we are today.
Thank you. Pastor Pezzi.
Yeah, I think this day and age has given us the opportunity to use spaces and platforms that we can all be heard now. You know, there are many avenues we can use. There are many things there are even collaborations. Right now, we talk about Annette and Chris. This is a good collaboration, and I think we should even just agree to set up maybe a group outside here so we can jot down notes and then compile those notes and publish them somewhere where we're talking about these things, and we're going to actually maybe do more research, refine the ideas, and then make sure that, we are clear and we are passionate about what we're doing, and we are showing love, and we're saying, hey, this is the information that we want to share with the world, and begin to knock down this thing called white privilege, so that the platform can be flat for everybody, and we can begin to work hand in hand as people that are created by our maker God, and we are all the same. There's no difference.
Thank you. That's really important. Annette? It's refusing to unmute. So let me move to.
Sorry, here.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. When I think about what we should do, and thank you, Pastor Peasy, for your suggestion. I love having these kinds of conversations, and I wish that they could go on for much longer, because I think there's depth in listening to each other and understanding. One of my brothers was murdered, and I never dreamed I would feel led by God to publicly forgive his killers in the courtroom in Virginia. And never before have I ever spoken of this publicly. I've told maybe a small handful of people, and two of you are on here today, that it was 3 Black men that murdered my brother. But I did not want the story to be, her brother was murdered by 3 Black men. My brother was murdered, period. The issue of what the ethnic background was of the people who took his life was not the issue. The issue was my brother was dead. God spoke to me and told me to forgive them, because he said, I love your brother's murderers as much as I love you, and as much as I love your brother. That was powerful and life-changing. Because of forgiveness, I was a transformed woman. And I, as a speaker and an author of the book Forgiveness, the Mystery and Miracle, I've developed a freedom formula that I believe works. I know it works. We have to, and it will work here as well. We need to, number 1, face the issues. Number 2, feel the pain. And we've only begun to scratch the surface here today. To face the issues, feel the pain, and make positive choices. What are the choices that we as a group and we as the viewers and listeners can make to make a difference? The 4th step is to let go of the hurt. And that is the forgiveness piece, where we have to let go of those chains that hold us tight in those painful past experiences. And we have to release them and let go of them. And when we can release, no matter what the color of our skin is, no matter what our background is, we've all experienced the hurts. We need to release those hurts so that we can then feel the freedom. And it is my prayer that as we go forth, somehow we can help others to forgive the past and let go, so that we can experience freedom and in our common humanity, Lee.
Thank you, Annette. Chris?
Oh my God.
I didn't think we were going to have, I thought the clock was going to be up, but I'll just read what I put in the chat because it's what I wanted to say, right? So 2 things, right? First is a quote from the Baha'i Faith, which I'm a member. It says, abandon once and for all, this is about racism, abandon once and for all the usual inherent and sometimes unconscious sense of superiority. to correct their tendency towards revealing a patronizing attitude. So that was to white people, right? And there was I didn't bring it, but there's a corresponding what Black people's responsibility was. And then finally, my Indigenous friend gave me this. She said to me, racism dehumanizes both the oppressed and the oppressor. No one wins with that way of being. Talk about what you do to unlearn what you did learn, having to question yourself and everything, and diligence is needed. So it's it is really something that not being racist isn't enough. We won't solve this just because we're not racist. That's not enough.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Thank you so much to all our panel members. We have come to the end of our discussion today, but it looks like we need to come back for round 2, where we're mapping out what to do next, because 2 minutes each to talk about what to do next, which is where the journey begins, is not enough. So I want to thank you all for taking time to come and share your views, your convictions, and also to educate, because there are so many people out there who really do not want to believe, but it is because maybe they're not allowing themselves to have more information. But then if we keep putting it in their face, eventually they might say, you know what, let me look at this and listen to this. And I'm pretty sure our voices have spoken to some. Thank you. Good night to all our viewers. We'll be back soon. Bye-bye.